Okay, everybody, we're going to have to break this down in segments because of the capabilities of a phone in producing a video. Okay, so let's get right to this. If you guys will look to the left of your screen right here, this is the anomalous discovery in the Sahara. There are quite a few individuals that are jumping on this, hey, this is Atlantis bandwagon because it fits the description of Plato. Okay, so let's do this. Let's really briefly and very quickly talk about all of the things that Plato said about Atlantis. One is that it was away from him through the Straits of Gibraltar and the Pillar of Hercules into the Atlantic. So that does not fit the Sahara whatsoever. Two is that Poseidon was the king of Atlantis and he handed over the reins to his son Atlas. And the Atlantic Ocean is named after his son Atlas. This would lead us to believe that since Plato also says that Atlantis was overrun with water, there was a big deluge and all this water covered over Atlantis, then Poseidon could not be residing at Atlantis any longer. So, what does this tell us about the true location of Atlantis? One, Atlantis is nowhere in the realms of the Roman or Greek pantheons. The Mount Olympus has nothing to do with Atlantis whatsoever, because the water covered it over, and all of these gods that were in Atlantis at one time, they left Atlantis when the water came or before. And they went and set up shop in completely different areas. How do we know this? Plato said Poseidon was an Atlantean. Are there other gods in other pantheons that are mentioned as Atlantean? And we're going to find that yes, they are. Now, we're going to be looking at a lot of different evidence that's going to point us to where Atlantis is, but I got to go through all this and show you all of the proof so that you will actually go, wow, it's all right there. It's been right there before our eyes where Atlantis really is, and we just didn't see it. It's not Santorini. It's not the Sahara Desert. It's not Spain. It's not anywhere in the Mediterranean whatsoever. It's just like Plato said. We're going to see it. The emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean that they claim was discovered in a mound in South America, of all places. I do believe that's where they said it was found. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But I do believe that's where they claim it was found, which is interesting. And the fact that he was also spoke of Atlantis and claimed to be an Atlantean in the Emerald Tablets tells us a big, huge thing. One is that all of the gods all across civilizations were one and the same, just like I've said in all of my other videos when I discussed all of the ancient gods. So, if they came from Atlantis and set up new shop in Egypt and in the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, let us see what the evidence tells us. In the Emerald Tablets, or the Thoth the Atlantean, he goes on to talk about Atlantis and its location as an archipelago consisting of two large islands, which existed in the Atlantic Ocean a long time ago, also about the highly developed civilization of the Atlanteans. The most important point about the civilization is that it possessed a true religious philosophical knowledge, which allowed many people to advance quickly in their development to the divine level and accomplish thus their personal human evolution. Okay, so think about this for a second. Does it not stand to reason that if Atlantis was this location of the gods, wouldn't it then be logical that the creation story or even the biblical Garden of Eden would have been in Atlantis? Don't you think? And another thing is that in the creation story, let's look at the biblical aspect here, is that the Bible tells us that there was four main characters in the creation story. Genesis 1, 2, and whatever. And you had a god, you had a serpent, and you had Adam and Eve. Isn't it very strange that not only could this deity speak to Adam and Eve in such a language that they could understand, but also the serpent could do the same because he beguiled Eve and she did consume of the tree of good and evil, according to the Bible. But you know what was interesting about the whole the whole go between the serpent and this deity is that the God didn't kick the serpent out of the Garden of Eden. He only kicked the Adam and Eve out. Isn't that very strange? But also, it should be remembered that the Jewish legends speak about how it was the serpent that impregnated Eve. And I've already mentioned this in other videos long ago, how that she indeed was impregnated by the serpent, not only with Cain, but with Abel as well. And then when Cain killed Abel, and he left the area he was already outside of the Garden of Eden, of course. But where did it say he went? It said he went eastward, and he dwelt in the land of Nod. Doesn't say how he got there. Doesn't say how far Nod was away. But what is interesting is that the serpent stayed in this Garden of Eden. The creation story, it most assuredly had to have been in Atlantis. So now we have to discover, is there evidence that's going to lead us to not only where this creation story happened, but where exactly Atlantis would be in relation to that creation story. And what you're looking at here on your screen is, of course, Poseidon, but we already got that. Oh, look, here it is. As the Atlanteans grew powerful and their ethics declined, their armies eventually conquered what? Africa, as far as Egypt. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't that where thought the Atlantean went? Isn't Greece and Rome before Egypt? Is that how all of the Atlantean deities, or these aliens, or whatever you want to call them, we'll just leave that moniker out of this presentation at the moment, just to say that here the evidence tells us that they did make their way from Atlantis through this area. Okay. So when it comes to the serpent of the Garden of Eden, and he plays a huge role in not only the biblical, and you also take a look at Moses. Do you remember how he used this serpent emblem to cure the people that were being attacked for some of the things they did against God in their trek of 40 years, according to the Bible? So obviously, the serpent plays a huge role in everything we're going to be looking at. Don't forget, the Vatican created an auditorium that was in the shape of a serpent. And if you look right here, the snake deity of the Maya was called Kukulkan, and also Quetzalcoatl of the Aztecs. And you have, watch this. I want you to notice something right here. Amaruka is translated land of the serpents. Do you see how Amaruka is very similar to America? And we have been led to believe, you know what? In our history books, we've been led to believe a lot of things that have not been true. Are we really to believe that Amerigo Vespucci is the real reason why America is named America today? I seriously doubt that's the truth. And all of the evidence that I'm going to present here is going to show you that Amaruka is the reason why America is named what it is today. So if you keep reading here, Peruvian prophecy states that all the Americans were once united by a common spiritual tradition and leader, and that they will be again. They were anciently united as Amaruca or Ameruca, meaning the land of the serpent during a time when the serpent was the universal symbol of mystical wisdom and spiritual power. One legend states that North and South America were named after a culture bearer known historically as Amaru Muru or Amaru Meru, the serpent Meru. Okay, so where do we see a lot of evidence? Remember the Garden of Eden story, the serpent was there. He was allowed to be there. Why was he there? Why was he not cast out after he did what he did according to the Bible? Because he plays a huge role. And how huge of a role does he play? Well, for one, if you look at here at the Sumerian depictions of Enki, he was depicted as part serpent and part God, alien, man, whatever you want to call him. That's how he was depicted. As a matter of fact, when Utnapishtim or Atrahasis or the other individual, what was it? I can't remember the other name off the top of my head. But when Enki warned him of a flood and told him to get the hell out of Dodge, build a ship, get out of here, he came to him on the other side of a reed wall. And this is the depiction that they had of Enki. He was part serpent. Okay. In a stellar relief out of, I do believe this is not Inca, but this is Mayan. And if you look here, this is the body of a serpent and a humanoid or a human or maybe even an alien. If you look at some of the headgear there, it could very well be alien. This could very well be a rendition of Enki himself. Now, remember what we said is that the Atlanteans made their way all the way up into Egypt. And if you'll notice that a lot of the headgear of the pharaohs and the gods were depicted with a cobra snake on their forehead, their headgear, with a vulture. That could be telling. Now, I've said many times is that the industry of the movies is operated and ran by the Illuminati and the secret societies. And if you guys will remember this image right here, this image is from the movie Noah. And why were they so hell-bent on showing you so much serpent imagery in the movie? Now, you remember the Jewish legends behind Noah, that he was like white as snow, and his own father questioned whether his son was actually his, because he said Noah looked like one of the gods. He was all white. So where would Noah have started off from? Where was he really? Where did Enki make contact with Noah or Atrahasis or Ziazudra or Utnapishtim to tell him to get the hell out of Dodge? Now remember, Noah was white. Okay, so let's take a look at something here a second. Okay, another thing is the Johns Hopkins University here. You remember, I've already discussed this. Do you see this emblem right here just below the eye of this serpent here? That is the symbol for the planet Saturn. And as I've said in all of my videos before, Ra, Saturn, Enki, the serpent Enki, they are all one and the same. And this, look at there, you have the planet with the ring around it right below the eye and to the left, and just directly below the eye, you have the symbol for the planet Saturn. Now, if you take a look at the artist of this, Mr. Hieronymus, he is part of a secret society, the Freemasons, and he is drawing in his murals exactly what the truth is. So let's keep going. The serpent plays such a huge role in all of this is that even the Vatican has gotten in on this. And if you'll look right here in the auditorium, I can't remember the exact name, but if you'll look, they've made the eyes, the fangs, and the walkway coming off of the stage, they've made it into a serpent's tongue. That's how important the serpent is in the role of not only Atlantis, but mankind itself. What do I mean that the serpent plays a huge role in mankind? Exactly the word, man. We're all men and women, but in a totality, all of us, we're called man. Somewhere along the line, someone has converted the moniker or the name of our species as humans. And do you guys remember the song by White Zombie where he sings this? More human than human? Take a look at right here. Take a look at this. The Druids had a high veneration for the serpent. Their great god, Hu, was typified by that reptile, and he is represented by the bards as the wonderful chief dragon, the sovereign of heaven. Hu. And you mix it with man, and you have human. Where have we seen the human depicted on an automobile logo? Take a look for yourself. The Alfa Romeo automobile logo, do you remember they just said about the Druids calling this god Hu as the king of the gods? Look at the serpent with the king's the king. God dang, I can't even think about what I'm trying to say here. The king's crown, and you'll see that there is a human coming out of the mouth of the serpent. That's right, human. The serpent Hu and man, human. Okay, so let's take a look at, you know what, we have to take a look at the United States, because what's interesting about that is this. You have this serpent mound here that's been here for thousands of years. And since the serpent plays into all of this, and giants, then we are going to have to look towards the United States for a few things to give us a clue to where Atlantis truly is. And as you can see right here, the serpent mound in the United States has a reason for being exactly where it's at. So let's take a look at something here. One of the books that I read that sparked my fire to prove where Atlantis was this book right here, The Suppressed History of America. Now, according to the story, President Jefferson, was it Jefferson or Jackson? No, I think it was Jefferson. So the story goes is that Meriwether Lewis, on his journey, was reporting, or he was having documented in their diary or their journals, let's get it straight, journals, that they had been not only been told about a giant race of tribes, several, but also that they had encountered giant tribal race. Red hair, tall. Okay. And then when this was being talked about by Meriwether Lewis, for some reason he was killed. And there's much proof out there that he was indeed killed behind all of the things that he was talking about. Okay, so you guys are going to have to bear with me here when we do this here, okay?
I am named Judah Cullum, a figure in Cherokee history, and a figure I need to know more about. Luckily, I know just the guy.
Okay. Whoops. like I said, you guys are going to have to bear with me. Now, you guys will remember this story of this person right here.
Yes, I have.
Okay. One of the legends about him is that as he walked all across the state, the depressions left by his footprints became the 14,000 plus lakes of Minnesota that we're so famous for. So, in a way, could Judiculla be analogous to Paul Bunyan?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Paul Bunyan and Judiculla probably would be very similar.
Are there...
Okay. God dang it. Like I said, you're going to have to bear with me here. Okay, so let's take a look at this.
From there, came here for training as well.
So, Jim, what you're saying is that there was a transfer of information through the native priesthoods, both in Europe, over here to North America, and back again. I mean, long before Columbus, right?
That's what they say.
When I was in Scotland, and then when I went to...
Okay, so what is that telling us? That before even Christopher Columbus, way before, there was travel between the United States, or let's call it America, or better yet, let's call it Amaruca. And they were traveling back and forth from Europe and back, and there was an exchange of information and stuff like that. Maybe, perhaps, that's where the Egyptians got their story of Atlantis, or perhaps the gods gave the priest of Egypt that information of where indeed they do come from. Okay, so let's take a look at some interesting stuff here.
Turtle map.
I originally thought that the Aztecs started in Mexico City and went north, and you're saying that she started somewhere in the north and then ended up in Mexico City. Is that correct?
The basic story is that they came from somewhere in the north and a place called Aztlan.
Aztlan, the name of the Aztecs' mythical homeland, has a couple of possible meanings: place of herons or place of whiteness. According to legend, the Aztecs' ancestors lived in Aztlan until their god, Huitzilihuachtli, told them to head south until they saw an eagle on top of a cactus devouring a snake. The eagle eating the snake, or the serpent, I mean, I've seen that imagery before.
Yeah, no, and the reason you have, and most people have also, is that in the Mexican flag, you have that symbolism. There's the eagle, the serpent, and the cactus. Now, this particular map has that imagery also.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And this.
This where you follow the spiral to the top. Not only that, it's laid out exactly like the mound site here, with the spiral mound on one end and the square mound on the
is in
other.
Georgia?
This mound, the
United
Creek
States?
Indians said this is where they performed their snake dance. And so they marched in procession around the mound until they reached the top for their ceremony. There was also Lake Okeechobee. Now, when the Spanish came to Lake Okeechobee, they found 3 people living around that lake: the Maya Imi, the Mayaka, and the Maya Yuaki. So 3 people.
Ancient Mayans, in the United States. Aztecs actually being in North America and going down into Mexico from America or the United States. Interesting. And let's go here.
Possessed sophisticated technology. But Atlantis was ultimately destroyed by a terrible cataclysm. And according to some researchers, the story of its destruction is strikingly similar to Native American traditions detailing the end of the Third World.
The Hopi and other Pueblo Indians tell us that their devastating cataclysm was due to human greed and wandering away from the spiritual truths of our Creator. What's interesting about this is that this idea is echoed in Plato's story of the destruction of Atlantis. The Atlanteans were also created by gods. As soon as humanity wandered off into materialism, that's when Atlantis was destroyed by water. A perfect correspondence with what the Hopi said happened at the end of the Third World.
Could there be a connection between the ancient Greek...
Oh, interesting, eh? You guys are going to like this thing.
Covered head,
Yep,
and you have this in Chichen Itza as well.
exactly.
Wow. Are there any other sites that might tie into what we're looking at here?
Absolutely. Just a few hours from here, there's a site called Okmulgee. They found an elite burial that showed cranial deformation, a known technique in the Maya world that they also use on their elites. Cranial deformation is a procedure they did at birth where they placed the child on a flattened board, placed another board on his head, which forced the skull to grow in a certain shape, which gave them sort of a flattened appearance to the forehead.
With everything I've seen so far, how come nobody knows about this?
People have been writing in the literature, the archaeological literature, about this connection for 150 years, but it has become a taboo subject.
I'm continually amazed.
Exactly, everybody.
This where you follow the spiral to the top.
Bear with me. Okay, so what do we know about the suppression of giant bones being found? Smithsonian Institute is definitely covering up these discoveries for a reason. What could possibly motivate them to suppress this knowledge that everybody could find out? Guess what that knowledge is, folks? It isn't the existence of giants. It will lead everybody to understand exactly where we are at right now. How can we prove that Amaruca, or the United States, is exactly Atlantis? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that. Whoops. Bear with me. Dang it. God. Now you remember, so these gods or aliens or whatever they are, they left Atlantis because of this flood. As a matter of fact, one of these Mexican, the story of Mexico, they were talking about what? That they were sent away from the United States and told to go to a land to the south where they would find an eagle eating a serpent. Okay. Let's take a look at something else here.
May have been part of a reconstruction effort.
So really what you're saying is you think it was probably built much earlier, perhaps thousands of years BC, and then it was rebuilt or modified by a later culture, possibly the Adena?
Yeah, there were burials that were found that suggested the archaic people who were before the Adena, going back 2000 BC, even 3000 BC, were thought to have constructed it.
Human bones?
Yeah, and they were fossilized. Is it possible that the serpent could have been here long before the Adena, and that the...
Okay. So, again, bear with me, please. Sorry. Do you guys remember I did a video about the Hoover Dam, and there was two particular constellations listed on the Hoover Dam. One was the constellation Orion, and the other one was Thuban. The true name of Thuban is actually Draco. So let's take a look at this right here.
The serpent also reflects from directly above a pattern of stars. So that's why we say the serpent is the most astonishing effigy anywhere in the world of its kind.
Some experts believe that along with more than 15 solar and lunar alignments, the Ohio Serpent Mound also reflects the star constellation Draco. In Latin, Draco means dragon, and a portion of the constellation does line up with the Serpent Mound below. I think that evidence of alignments proves that this mound was an ancient tool that reflects something similar to what the original builders were seeing in the heavens.
When we look at Serpent Mound, we're looking at something that was probably created by a genius, someone that loved astronomy and loved the Earth.
An adept.
Yep.
Whoops. Okay. So, God dang you. So now the question is, if the gods came from Atlantis, Thoth the Atlantean, Poseidon, and they found their way over towards the Mediterranean and into Egypt, And let's say the Sumerian gods also were Atlantean, and they came from wherever Atlantis was. Did they bring a form of writing with them over to Sumeria? Take a look at this.
1972. A group of hikers exploring a system of hidden caverns in Chaco Canyon discovered wall paintings and even cuneiform writings similar to those found on Sumerian artifacts. After careful analysis, ancient...
Okay. Are you guys all starting to pick up on what I'm saying? That indeed, Atlantis, the one that was once underwater, is in the Americas? So, but you're going, well, wait a minute. America's not underwater. Ah. Take a look at this. The Grand Canyon Monument to an Ancient Earth. Can Noah's flood explain the Grand Canyon? And if the flood was centralized, here's the thing. It is obvious that the people dispersed. There was a diaspora of individuals that left and went to different civilizations, and they brought with them a flood story. You can't have a Noah in every single territory where they had a boat. That's not the way it went. They came with oral traditions to these new civilizations from a certain starting point. Was that starting point the United States? I just showed you. The Aztecs came from the United States and were sent down south. You had these gods going over to different locations such as Egypt, Greek, Roman, and so on and so forth. Let's take a look at some of the evidence that's going to show us that indeed Atlantis was the United States. Layers over entire continents. Flood geologists believe that layers of sedimentary rock exposed across continents, such as observed at the Grand Canyon, are evidence of deposition out of turbulent water during the Genesis flood. They observed that strata standing far above sea level contain marine fossils and therefore conclude that they must have been deposited by high levels of water that covered the continents during the deluge. Flood geologists have different opinions about how deep or high the flood waters rose over the continents. So, what have we discovered about the Americas that seems to hold? We just saw in the Americas that there was a deformation of skulls. So in Paraka, we've discovered these skulls that don't have a sagittal suture. In case you guys don't know what that is that when a baby is born and they have a soft spot, and when that skull grows together, it leaves a suture line, sort of. And this right here, you'll see a lot of these Parakan skulls, they have no sagittal suture. That means that they were born without a soft spot. So these were most definitely not skull deformation. But what this does tell us is that, to me, there are other people, just like you saw in Georgia, and you'll see in African tribes in Africa, and also in Egypt itself. Head deformation. They deformed their heads to resemble the gods that they venerated so much. Now, if these gods or aliens came from Atlantis and were making their way across Africa into the Mediterranean, well, sure. Did they set up shop in the Sahara? Possibly. Is there any evidence that there was a big, huge overcovering of over in the Sahara Desert? Is there anything other than that anomaly that has just been discovered? No. But everything that I've shown you and everything I'm going to show you is going to lead you to believe the United States is in fact Atlantis. So, what other stuff? Do you remember her? Do you remember Nefertiti? Is it indeed the fact that Akhenaten, who was Moses, had taken his people and left Egypt? And there are historians that say that Akhenaten took his people and they went and they founded a city called Jerusalem. That would tell you that they were being led by some kind of, well, is the reason why this Akhenaten Moses had a deformed head? Did he practice was there a practice of deformation of skulls? Or is this the reason why the Jews happen to be having so much power on the earth today? Is because they are offspring of a certain alien race. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. That's a possibility. There are other things that about the Americas that would lead us to believe that there's something very special about South America and North America. All of the blocks being cut, the fact that they didn't have the tools to do so, but they're found. You have, let's see, what other good stuff that we have. You guys will remember this right here as well. This block. Since we already have raised the subject of the Hopi, let's talk about this ant people that rescued the Hopi coming out from underground. What did they rescue them from? Remember, the oral legends of the Hopi is that during the Blue Kachina, this race of beings came out from the ground and rescued them and took them underground to protect them from some kind of cataclysm. And if you'll look right here, look at the image right here in the middle. And he has these horns and everything. And I want to show you something else about this ant people who saved the Hopi Indians. I want to show you how they depict them here. Take a look at this. Do you see the ant people right here to the left? And do you see the Hopi natives, how they depict this? You see, this is an old picture here. This is how they depict that the ant people look like, coming out from the ground and saving their ancestors. Now, where have you guys seen it? Now, remember, ant people doesn't mean that they look like ants, right? It's because they came out of the ground, and that's the reason why they called them ant people. But look at their depiction right here. Where have you seen this imagery before in the past 6 or 7 years or less? Watch this. Remember the Goddard tunnel that opened in Switzerland? You know what I found very interesting about that whole thing? Is that this. I do believe that the Illuminati is based out of Switzerland. Exactly where this World Economic Forum is based out of. And this guy came out of this whole tunnel ceremony ritual was about this guy, the king of the world, coming out of the ground. Is he depicted as this ant people just like the Hopi described? Is that what this is all about? But even more so, remember the location. What was the location? The location was the United States. That the Hopi were rescued by these ant people, right? Okay. Here are just some of the giants that are mentioned from the Native American tribes of the United States. Look at how many different. Did they all meet with each other and go, hey, you know what? Let's fabricate a story about giants and we'll just give them names and blah, blah. No. If you look at all of these different tribes, knew about giants. There must have been, just like the Titan gods, Poseidon's father, Saturn Cronus, was a giant Titan. Where may he have come from if they originated from the land of Atlantis? Could Atlantis be Amaruka or America? And if you take a look at all of these different giants right here, you will see, God dang it. Another thing that leads me to believe this is that there were reported stories that came to Europeans that, okay, think about this for a second. So what was it that Christopher Columbus was setting out to do? Does anybody remember the story? Because the story got somehow conflicted somewhere. Because allegedly to Isabella and Ferdinand, kings of Spain, hey, you know what? If you fund me, I am going to find a route over to India so that we can do trading. No! The whole purpose of him going out there and them funding him is because he promised them that he was going to go to a certain location and he was going to find gold. He didn't find the gold that he was looking for because, as a matter of fact, he came across the Arawak Indians, but that was a big shit show right there, everybody. The Arawak Indians being exterminated because they didn't find gold or because of the diseases that were brought. But what made Christopher Columbus believe that there was gold in the United States or the location of where he was going to? Because for some reason, there was a big story about a certain mythical land or mythical king called El Dorado. In his own accounts of his adventure, Pizarro describes El Dorado as a lake, not a man. A third contemporary source, the Chronicle Pedro de Cieza de Leon, describing the very same expedition, writes of El Dorado as a valley. So, I am obviously not the first individual to state that the United States or the Americas was indeed Atlantis, or still is. As I've already showed you, is that, how about the Great Salt Lake? How about the Salton Sea in California? How about the Soda Lake? How about many other different lakes here in the United States that are salt water? How did that happen? How did Egyptians make it up into caves up in the Grand Canyon and deposit relics? Unless they were traveling a waterway that the Grand Canyon was filled with a certain height of water for them to be able to do so. In 1552, the historian Francisco Lopez de Gomora became one of the first to suggest that the American continents were, in fact, Atlantis. America was, he said, greater than Africa and Asia combined, and the peoples of Mexico even called water Atl, the very name of Atlantis, in memory of the sunken capital of ancient times. Nearly 5 centuries later, the new book, America Before, opens with its author, Graham Hancock, telling readers that after decades of ignoring the obvious clue, Atlantis, because of the stigma attached to Atlantis research, blah, blah, blah. Okay, when it comes to solar deities, and what you're going to find is really interesting is this. Talking about a Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The most famous type of solar cult is the sun dance of the Plains Indians of North America. In the pre-Columbian civilizations of Mexico and Peru, sun worship was a prominent feature in Aztec religion, extensive human sacrifice. Okay, so human sacrifice, huh? Does this image right here look familiar to you all? Sol Invictus, the invincible sun or the unconquered sun? And doesn't it look strikingly similar to our Statue of Liberty? Is that perhaps why the SOL of Statue of Liberty mirrors Sol, S-O-L, Invictus? I do believe it does. And I do believe that the Freemasons are holding on to the secret. I think that's the reason why the Smithsonian is working hand in hand with Freemasons. Do you guys remember that the Freemasons actually do weird rituals in caves with a skull? Isn't that really interesting? Okay, so this whole Statue of Liberty was dedicated by an individual who was a Freemason. The very base of the Statue of Liberty is dedicated by Freemasons. This Statue of Liberty is standing over Atlantis, everybody. Here are just some of the salt content lakes in the United States here, just to show you some of these that I looked up. Okay, just some of the different ones. Those are just a couple of them. I'll just leave you at that. Now, let's get out of here and let us take a look at some of the last few things for you here.
Well, basically, let's look at this map here. You see that these people are all along what's currently the north coast of.
Okay, so if you look at where he's showing, he's got Spain and France circle, whatever, not highlighted, but yeah, you know what I mean, lightened up. And if you look just below Spain, there is the Straits of Gibraltar and the Pillars of Hercules. That's the Pillars of Hercules right there. So to the left is where Plato described that Atlantis was. Listen to what this guy's going to say.
Spain and southwest France. But during the Ice Age, the coast was clear out here because of the lower sea level.
So you created more land out into what is now the ocean where these people were living, and now it's under 200-300 feet of water.
Well, for instance, right here, there's over 400,000 acres. They're now underwater.
400,000 acres now underwater. Okay, you guys ready to look at the big picture? Okay. What we were just looking at, and I wish I could, oh, maybe I can. Let's take a look at this. No, not that one. This one. This, everybody, is in between Spain and Africa. And if you look here, going across like Plato said, and remember, he's talking about now that there's land underwater. So this must have went further into the Atlantic with the landmass, and it took us straight over to here. And look at the line. Look at the line here. See that? Able to lead right into Europe from the United States, and all of that landmass would have been there, and there would have been nothing in between there but land. Well, for the most part. So let's take a look. Let's see if we got anything left. Anything left here. Okay, let's take a look at this. Or
Pennsylvania woods. This site is actually just one of about 800 mysterious stone sites hidden throughout the Northeast. I think there's a solar alignment incorporated into the Pennsylvania chamber on the summer solstice, and I'm having a model built to prove it. The use like a ritual bath chamber in the middle of the Pennsylvania woods. This site is actually just one of about 800 mysterious.
So I think it's important we look back over this one more time, because here's the thing.
Originally thought that the Aztecs started in Mexico City and went north, and you're saying that she started somewhere in the north and then ended up in Mexico City. Is that correct?
The basic story is that they came from somewhere in the north and a place called Aztlan.
Aztlan, the name of the Aztecs' mythical homeland, has a couple of possible meanings. Place of herons or place of whiteness.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm telling you is that, to me, not only were the Hopi ancestors saved by a race of beings that lived under the ground, that were part of the Atlantean Empire, that this Atlantean Empire also sent the Aztecs to get out of the way a long, long time ago. It's a good possibility that the Atlanteans, when after this flood. Now, here's the thing. Here's another thing I want you to look at. In case some of you maybe go, well, the United States, yeah, it was probably underwater a long hundreds of thousands of years ago. Well, wait a minute. We know that we were underwater hundreds of thousands of years ago. But don't we go through cycles? And isn't it possible that we don't even know that the United States was under a flood just several thousands of years ago? But we do know that the Egyptians left artifacts in the Grand Canyon. Somehow they got up into caves. Somehow their ships got somehow down the Grand Canyon. Somehow there was water on this earth. Somehow there was individuals that came out from the ground and rescued the Hopi. Somehow there was a God that told the Aztec Indians to leave North America and to go down into Mexico. Somehow Plato wrote about Atlantis and about how Poseidon was the king of Atlantis. Somehow Egypt has a god named Thoth the Atlantean. And somehow all of the evidence that I just been showing you leads me to believe that the reason why all of the cover-up by the Smithsonian and the secret societies about giants and other evidence is they're trying to prevent the public from knowing that they're actually residing on the continent of Atlantis. Thanks, everybody.